The picornavirus family viruses can be remembered by the mnemonic PERCH. Can you name the 5 picornaviruses? They are the poliovirus, echovirus, rhinovirus, Coxsackie virus, and hepatitis A virus. It is important to remember that all viruses in this family are enteroviruses, except for rhinovirus. They are called enteroviruses because they infect the enteric or the GI tract. By infecting the GI tract, these viruses are all spread by the fecal-oral route. In addition, something in common for polio, echo, and Coxsackie viruses is that they cause an aseptic meningitis. Do you remember what the term aseptic meningitis means? Aseptic meningitis, in broad terms, is an inflammation of the meninges in the brain that is not caused by a bacteria. It is called aseptic meningitis because if a spinal tap is done, the cerebrospinal fluid will not exactly look pus-filled like in a bacterial meningitis. Therefore, it is called aseptic meningitis. An important thing to know about the picornavirus family is how they produce protein products. As we see here, the positive sense RNA, represented by this red line, is directly translated into one long polypeptide chain by ribosomes in the cytoplasm. The protein here is represented by this blue line. This one long polypeptide or protein chain is then chopped into smaller proteins by enzymes in a process called proteolysis. Now let's talk about the poliovirus. Do you remember how this virus is spread? Remember, it is spread by the fecal-oral route, a feature common to all the picornaviruses except for the rhinovirus. In the majority of cases, the poliovirus infects the GI tract and causes what is called abortive poliomyelitis. Abortive poliomyelitis is a benign condition where the virus does not affect the central nervous system and only produces a mild febrile viral illness. However, in unlucky individuals, the virus can enter the central nervous system and cause the infamous paralytic poliomyelitis, which we all associated with polio. Paralysis occurs because the virus preferentially infects and damages the anterior motor horn cells that are located in this portion of the spinal cord. Do you remember the spinal cord tract that is responsible for bringing the motor neurons, that synapse here in the anterior horn? That would be the lateral corticospinal tract. Very good. By the early 20th century, poliovirus had caused major epidemics that were responsible for crippling thousands of people, mostly young children during the summer months. This image here shows the infamous iron lung, which is a negative pressure ventilator that helped children breathe when the virus infected the nerves of the diaphragm. Thinking back to anatomy, do you remember the nerve roots that innervate the diaphragm? That'd be C3, C4, and C5. Keep the diaphragm alive. Thanks to the development of polio vaccines in the 1950s, the number of polio cases per year decreased dramatically to the point where it is almost unheard of in the United States today. Of note, the Guillain-Barré syndrome is the most common cause of acute paralysis in the United States. So there are 2 vaccines available to prevent the poliovirus infection. Do you remember what they are? They are the Salk and Sabin vaccines. Very good. And what type of vaccines are they? The Salk vaccine contains killed virus, and you can remember that with the K in Salk. It is also called the inactivated poliovirus vaccine, also called IPV, and it is administered by an intramuscular shot. The Sabin vaccine, on the other hand, contains a live, attenuated form of the poliovirus, and it is delivered or administered in the oral form, and it is also called the oral polio vaccine, or OPV. The Sabin vaccine is not used in the United States, but it has been the vaccine of choice in many other countries. So why is it preferred in some countries, but not in ours? Well, the vaccine, or the Sabin vaccine, is preferred for several reasons. One, it is easy to administer. Remember, it is orally administered. Also, since it is a live attenuated virus, it induces a better immune response, including both humoral and cell-mediated responses. In addition, it leads to a mucosal IgA, or immunoglobulin A response in the enteric tract, which interrupts transmission of the virus through the fecal-oral route. However, because the Sabin vaccine is a live attenuated vaccine, on very rare occasions, about 1 per 750,000 vaccine recipients, the virus can mutate. It can mutate and revert back to a wild-type virus, and that has the ability to cause the sinister paralytic poliomyelitis. This is the reason, the ability to revert back to the wild-type virus, that prevents us from using this vaccine in the United States and in many other industrialized countries. So here in the United States, we prefer using the Salk, or the killed vaccine, that is administered intramuscularly. Next is the Coxsackie virus, which is a virus that can present in humans in a few different ways. There are two forms of Coxsackie virus A, Coxsackie virus B. Coxsackie virus A is responsible for causing herpangina, which is a painful blistering infection of the mouth that usually affects children. Coxsackie A also causes acute hemorrhagic conjunctivitis, as well as hand, foot, and mouth disease, as we can see here in this image. Hand, foot, and mouth disease commonly affects children and is characterized by fever, commonly sore throat, loss of appetite, and malaise. After this onset, it results in painful vesicles, as we can see in these images. These vesicles appear on the mouth, or periorally. They can also appear on the throat. They also can appear on the hands and on the feet. Remember that Coxsackie virus is one of the few number of pathogens that causes lesions on the palms and soles. Do you remember the other two important causes of lesions on the palms and soles? Remember, that is syphilis and Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Or do you remember how we treat syphilis? We treat it with a long-acting benzathine penicillin. And do you remember what the first-line treatment for Rocky Mountain spotted fever is? That would be our good friend doxycycline. Coxsackie B virus is responsible for causing an encephalitis, causes cardiomyopathy, and it causes that aseptic meningitis. It is actually one of the most common causes of congestive heart failure in young people when causing this cardiomyopathy. So as we can see, Coxsackie virus can manifest in many different ways. The rhinovirus is the last member of the picornavirus family. It is the number one cause of the common cold. If we remember, the rhinovirus is the one picornavirus that is not considered an enterovirus. And the reason it is not considered an enterovirus is because it is acid labile. Basically what this means is that the rhinovirus is sensitive to the acid in the stomach and is destroyed there. By being destroyed in the stomach, it doesn't make it to the small intestine and therefore cannot infect the GI tract like the other enteroviruses. So since rhinovirus can't make it past the stomach, it infects the nasal mucosa instead. In fact, an interesting thing about rhinoviruses is that they prefer cold temperatures. It replicates the best in temperatures that are below physiologic temperature in our body. The nose is actually a colder part of our body compared to the gut, and therefore it is why the rhinovirus likes to infect there. Now it makes sense when your grandma always made you or used to make you eat chicken noodle soup when you were sick. It warms up the nose and actually inhibits replication of the virus. Yellow fever virus is an important flavivirus, and it is considered to be one of the arboviruses. Arbovirus stands for arthropod-borne virus, which means that it's transmitted by an arthropod vector. In the case of yellow fever, the arthropod that transmits the virus is the Aedes mosquito. The yellow fever virus causes yellow fever, a disease that is characterized by jaundice, chills, fever, and black vomit. Why do you think the vomit is black? The vomit is black because it contains digested blood. The virus infects hepatocytes, causing the jaundice, which can help you recall why it is named yellow fever. Now let's cover the other important flaviviruses while we are in this category. Do you remember the other flaviviruses? That includes hepatitis C virus, dengue virus, St. Louis encephalitis virus, and West Nile virus. West Nile, dengue, and St. Louis are also arboviruses, meaning they're transmitted by arthropods. You're less likely to come across St. Louis encephalitis and West Nile virus on the exam. Probably the most important of these to know is the dengue virus because it is the most common arbovirus. The dengue virus infects macrophages, and a person that is already infected with dengue virus can get a secondary infection by a different serotype, and the antibodies against the first serotype cross-react and cause dengue hemorrhagic fever. Dengue hemorrhagic fever is a serious disease and presents with a fever, a hemorrhagic tendency, and bleeding, commonly from the skin or the nose. The patient typically presents in shock. The rotavirus and the cultivirus are the two types of clinically relevant viroviruses. Rotavirus is the higher yield virus and the one we will spend our time discussing. Rotavirus is the one double-stranded RNA virus. It is highly transmissible via the fecal-oral route and is seen frequently during the winter months in daycare centers and kindergarten. It happens to be the most common cause of fatal diarrhea in children and is known as the daycare diarrhea. You can remember this mnemonic by remembering rota, or right out the anus. The virus leads to destruction of the villi, or villus destruction, in the GI tract. This destruction leads to loss of sodium and potassium, resulting in fluid loss and electrolyte imbalances. Treatment of this disease involves supportive care, but there are 2 vaccines available, both of which contain live rotavirus. Remember, rotavirus is a segmented virus, and do you remember the other 3? They include Bunya, orthomyxo, and arenavirus. Remember the mnemonic BOR. Let's remind ourselves of the viruses that are spread through the fecal-oral route. They are norovirus, rotavirus, both which cause gastroenteritis, adenovirus, and the enteroviruses of the picornavirus family, namely polio, echo, Coxsackie, and hepatitis A virus.